Andrew Schulz went too far, and not enough people are standing on how bad this situation actually is. The Andrew Schulz and Kendrick Lamar situation is disappointing on so many levels. It was disappointing to see Andrew's reply. It was disappointing to see how many people failed to hold him accountable. And I was even disappointed in myself for not taking a stronger stance when we spoke on the bigger picture about this. And that's why I wanted to make this video. As a white guy who has been accepted into a lot of spaces within hip hop, whether it be my show, whether it be companies, whether it be red carpets, events, studios, etc. And after years of work, I very much appreciate the space I'm in. But being accepted into a space is one thing. Being comfortable enough to make certain jokes or say certain things within the space that you've been accepted into is another. And when you feel too comfortable in your seat, that's when things seem to go too far. Before we get into Kendrick's lyrics or Schultz's reply, we have to go back to what initially sparked this. Schulz did an episode of his show Flagrant with a UK podcasting duo called Shits and Gigs, and one moment in the podcast in particular went viral.
What is the black girlfriend effect? This is
you not know about this?
Glow up the other culture.
Yeah, so you'll see a guy who's had a black girlfriend, all of a sudden he's got buzz cut, like clean shape up. Glows up, bro.
Yeah, I like that.
Glows the fuck up.
They shave their hair because they start losing it. Because they're so stressed being around this black girl complaining about shit all the fucking time. That's why they gotta shave their hair.
Nah, bro. White guys with black girlfriends, they
grow a beard
because
there's more cushion when they get slapped the fuck out of it. That's hilarious. I think the black girlfriend effect, it might be a protective instinct, bro.
You think?
Protective.
Yeah. Do you guys have you ever had black girlfriends?
Yeah.
Have you ever had white girls?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. What's your favorite?
We love them all.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
We love them all.
Yeah.
That means white.
Yo, who gets
That means white.
No. Translation.
Kendrick fan?
Now, as someone who has definitely seen the glow up from dating a woman of color, I get the initial TikTok trend. I don't think my beard or my fashion would be as good had I not been with her. But it was Andrew's joking explanation that understandably had a lot of people upset. At the end of this joke, he also called out Kendrick fans, saying, "Kendrick fans, go get him," which is likely what led to the subliminal shot on whacked out murals in the first place. Now, I wasn't expecting Schulz to apologize for the joke because he never has before, but I was disappointed in no accountability for why the joke would have hurt people upon reflection. In their initial reaction episode, Akash made light of Shits and Gigs' apology where they said they should be protecting black women, and Andrew had a similar reply on Brilliant Idiots this week saying that if one group is protected, then it means we think lesser of them.
They're allowed to get offended. They're allowed to have their feelings hurt. All these things are allowed to happen, but we're allowed to make jokes. And in my opinion, everyone gets these jokes.
Right.
So this idea that like there's a one singular protected group, in my opinion, once there's a protected group, it either means we think more or less of that group than everybody else. And once one is protected, now jokes become racist. Because now it means either you think less of everyone else so you can make fun of them, or you think less of that group so you don't make fun of them. And I don't feel that way.
This YouTuber named D'Angelo made a good video about this, which I'll link below. But when people say protect black women, it's not just a saying that comes out of nowhere. It comes from the fact that black women are some of the most vulnerable people and groups of people in the world. They literally die giving birth at a higher rate than any other race of women because they aren't taken seriously. So when they're saying things are offending them or hurting them and they aren't taken seriously in what they're saying, or things are just brushed off as it's just a joke, that adds to the entire picture. And this context is important. I'm not one to say that things are off limits when it comes to jokes. I'm actually a big fan of comedy and I understand comedic liberty. Just like I'm a fan of artistic expression in music. I always say use your art form to say what you have to say. Put it in the art, which is exactly what Kendrick did to reply to the Andrew situation. Whacked Out Murals was written around the time of September if we take Kendrick at his word when he said his mural was whacked out yesterday. That was September 9th. This situation happened mid-September, which is why a lot of people associated Andrew and his comment towards black women with Shits and Gigs to Kendrick's lyrics. The fact that Kendrick took a stance and wanted to defend black women with his art through his lyrics, and the fact that it spiraled to this, is insane. The reply to Kendrick saying, hey, maybe we should leave black women alone since they could be more vulnerable than other people, or if there is someone who's joking too far about black women, maybe we should stand up for it or not allow it. The fact that the response to that was, I'm going to emasculate you and grape you, that to me is crazy. But the reason why I was so disappointed and disgusted at Schulz's reply wasn't just because the joke wasn't funny. You can make jokes all you want that don't land. It was because of the context of the so-called joke. Schulz considers himself someone who is a historical comedian, as in someone who understands the nuances and history of different cultures and places in order to make jokes. This allows him to do a lot of crowd work. But this wasn't an off-the-cuff reply. This was a thought-out reply that he had over a week to think about. And so I can't just allow the claims of ignorance that he didn't know the historical implications. Schulz said that if he wanted to, he could physically overpower Kendrick and grape him. I'm not going to play the clip because you've seen it elsewhere. You've seen it trend on Twitter. And I just find it disrespectful. You've seen it enough. Not only was the joke not funny, but the context behind the joke that historically informs it is what makes this so disappointing to me. Both Mark Lamont Hale and Justin Hunt have great videos explaining some of this context, which I'll link below. But buck breaking is a term used for when slave owners would physically humiliate and sexually assault black men in front of other slaves as a showcase of power and a warning not to disobey and stay in line. And that's exactly what Schulz was seemingly doing with this so-called joke. He was trying to showcase his power over someone who is also, by the way, viewed as the most powerful artist in hip-hop at the moment. Think about the context of that. And like I said, Schulz isn't getting a pass of ignorance here if he's claiming to be so historically well-read and so thought out. Kendrick's reply was towards Andrew, but it was also towards the people who allowed things to be said with no pushback. It's not about censoring comedians from making jokes. I hate that we've made it into this issue. Kendrick clearly has a good sense of humor. If you look at some of the petty things that he's done this year, and even Andrew was quick to point out, he's working with the South Park creators on a comedic show. Kendrick has a good sense of humor. He appreciates comedy. That's not the issue. The issue is allowing people to say things that could be hurtful or disrespectful in the context of history and not to push back on what they're saying at all. Joke or not, in this case, that goes for every one of his co-hosts. But that isn't my job to hold all of those people accountable, so I'll leave that up to whoever feels the need to. Even if you want to give comedic license or freedom of speech to people, you can admit when something wasn't funny, and you can also admit when something was taken too far. You can have accountability for your own actions, and you can also call out the actions of others. And even on our podcast, The Bigger Picture, I know there were a lot of people who might have been disappointed that I myself didn't take a stronger stance on this issue because I was disappointed after we filmed. When I was on the way back home, I thought to myself, I should have stood up a little stronger for something that I claim to be extremely important to me. I'm with a woman of color who would have no problem with a joke. Me and her would throw jokes back at each other all the time. And that's why I want to clarify, all of my sentiments aren't about comedy or jokes. It's about the history behind the sentiments that inform these jokes that I think were taken way too far. I'm in a space now where I'm moving from being a fan of people to becoming peers with them. And if I'm being honest with you, which to me is an extremely important part of my career and my connection with people who watch me, this has been a really tough moment for me because I'm going from being a fan where I looked up to a lot of these people to being in the same league as them, to being a peer. I'm on stages with people who have been in this industry for a very long time. I'm interviewing people who are legends. I'm in the room with legends a lot, okay? I'm in the same conversation sometimes as some of the people that I looked up to. And I'm going from being a fan and looking up to these people to being on the same level. And that's actually been very difficult to me, specifically in this situation. I'd have no problem admitting I've watched Brilliant Idiots for 10 plus years. You've heard me say it multiple times. You know, I went to a Schulz comedy show in 2016. He was nothing but nice to me after the show. He gave me great advice. And I would never take that away. But that's why it's become very difficult to me to balance this, right? Moving from a fan of people to being in the same conversation and in the same space as them and quote unquote the same league in terms of our show being to the forefront of the world or me being to the forefront of the world as a media personality. But I never want to let the thought of how people I once looked up to view me get in the way of how I view their current actions or how I feel about myself and my morality. And in this case, this is how I feel. The joke wasn't funny and neither was the sentiment. And yes, Andrew can receive the consequences from it, but I don't want to be someone to just sit on the fence on an issue like this. And if the consequence of this are that some people who I once looked up to don't like me, then I'll deal with those consequences as well. Like I've said before, I hold people to a higher standard when I feel like they can do better. And in this case, there are a lot of people who I wish did better. If you're a fan of me, I hope that this helps you understand where I'm coming from. And if nobody else told you yet today, I appreciate you. See you in the next video. Peace.